Hello students, welcome back to Premier Scholars Academy. My name is Aiden Chang and today's video is part of the CS in Python roadmap, and this video is going to be very important. I'm going to introduce the topic of iteration, the next step in your programming journey. I'm trying a different style of teaching today, so let me know in the comments if this is better or worse for you. So let's get started. So what is iteration? Imagine this. You're feeling good, so you decide to take some selfies. Damn! What the heck? I can't take a good photo of myself. Boom! So you keep taking photos of yourself over and over again, trying to get that perfect shot. This is a real life example of iteration. Doing the same thing again and again, with each photo being a different iteration of a process until a certain condition is met. In the previous example, the condition would be getting a good photo of yourself. Iteration in the coding world is also commonly referred to as looping, sort of because we're doing the same thing over and over again in a loop. This is especially useful in coding since we can take advantage of the much faster thinking speeds of computers to do lots of iterations for us to solve problems. So how do we actually write iterative methods in Python? Well, let me introduce the first way, which is what's usually called a for loop. In Python, the for loop is super simple and isn't really like other languages. The syntax goes as follows. We just start with the for, then what is usually called the iteration variable, then the keyword in, and then what we usually want to actually iterate through. Right now, we don't know much about what we can really iterate through, but we will learn about that in the next video. So let's just say right now I just wanted to print the numbers 0 through 4. I mean, yeah, I could just write, 5 different print statements, but wouldn't it be easier if we could only write like 2 lines of code to do the exact same thing? This is sort of when a for loop comes in handy, and here's how we would do this example in Python. So before I sort of write this for loop and introduce it to you guys, the first thing that we're going to have to do is talk about the range function. So the range function in Python basically just creates a range of numbers. Instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, we can create a range. So the syntax for a range function is pretty simple. It's just the word range and the parentheses. There are 2 ways to write a range function. The first one is using the first number and the last number included in the parentheses. The important thing to remember about the range function is that it does not include the last number you have. So if we were to print the numbers 1 through 5, our input values would be 1 through 6 because the number 6 is not going to be part of the range function. Now the second way to write the range function is using only one number. If you can see here, it says range and then the parentheses and stop. This basically means we're allowed to just call the range function with only one value, and this value would be the stop value. But important thing to remember when you only input one number is that the default starting value will be 0. So in order to write a for loop, we would just go for, and this is what's called an iteration variable. And we can really name this anything we want. Let's just say I. It's common for variable names, in-loop variables, to be named I, num, j, k, but it can be really whatever you want. And then we're going to have the word in. Let's put the range function. And let's put the input of the ranges of the numbers we want. We want to print the numbers 1 through 5, so we're going to do 1 through 6, like this, colon. And then in order to print the number, we're going to print the iteration variable, just like this. So now, if we were to run this code, save it first, now we run it. As you can see here, the numbers 1 through 5 will be printed. So now that we have a small grasp on for loops, what if we want to keep iterating while a case is true, instead of when we are done going through all the numbers or something? Well, I mean, we could do this using a for loop, but it would be easier to do this using what's called a while loop. While loops and for loops share similar use cases, but it's easy to tell when it is better to use which one just by saying something while you're iterating. So let's take these 2 things as examples, and I want you to tell me which one you think would be better for a for loop and which one you think would be better for a while loop. So here's the first one. You're at a competitive hot dog eating competition, of course you are, and there are 40 hot dogs in front of you. However, some hot dogs have mustard on them while some have ketchup. When you're eating, you want to take into account how many hot dogs had just ketchup on them. Do you have an answer? This would be a good case for using a for loop. The condition that we're looking for won't end the loop, so we know that no matter how many hot dogs have ketchup on them, you're still going to demolish all 40 hot dogs. Of course you are. For more clarity on why this is a good case for a for loop, just sound it out. For each hot dog, how many have only ketchup? It sounds right when you say for. Could you use a while loop? I mean, yes. But at the end of the day, is there really a big difference? Not necessarily. So now I'm going to modify this scenario a little bit. It turns out that one of the hot dogs is really moldy, and you really don't like moldy hot dogs, surprisingly. When you take a bite into that moldy hot dog, you just want to withdraw right there, then and there, because the mold is simply just too much for you. Do you think a for loop or a while loop would be better in this situation? Well, if you said while loop, you're right. Just sound it out. While the current hot dog we're eating isn't moldy, just keep eating. While loops are more commonly used when the condition that we're searching for ends the loop. Let's take that selfie example from the beginning. I'm going to keep taking selfies until I get a super good one. Once again, could this be a situation for a for loop? I mean, yeah, I had an ending case like if I only had in my room for 100 more photos. The point is that in a given situation, 9 out of 10 times you can use either the while or the for loop, but at the end of the day, you can probably just use both. Through practice, you can understand different situations and when it's better to use one versus the other. So now that we know a little bit about iteration in Python, let's talk a little bit about controlling what happens inside of a loop. So in order to control things inside of a loop, there are what's usually called in-loop statements. And these statements help you decide what happens inside of a loop. The first statement that we're going to talk about is probably the most useful one. It's the break statement, which is pretty self-explanatory. The break statement will break out of the loop and end it prematurely. This is usually used in a case where a condition is important and it terminates the loop entirely, like the hot dog eating one with the moldy hot dog. The next statement is the continue statement, which is a little harder to understand. The continue statement will continue on to the next iteration of the loop and it ignores all of the code below it. This is most commonly used when there's a case you want to skip or ignore. Like in a for loop, iterating by 1 and you only want to sum the odd numbers, you would use the continue statement on the even numbers. The last one that we are going to learn about is the pass statement. And I believe that the pass statement quite literally does nothing. I'm pretty sure it tells the Python interpreter to literally do nothing. We'll learn about these later more, but for a good use for the pass statement is when you want to fill in the inside of a function so that you can run your code without any errors. So now that we understand a little bit about iteration Python, let's go ahead and write some examples. So let's start off simple. We already have a for loop here, and we're just going to write another one. And we're just going to print all the numbers from 0 to 10. So once again, we're going to have to use the range function to do this. And once again, we can name this in-loop variable anything we want. Let's just name it num. We're going to have to use the word in, and then let's make a range. And since it's 0 to 10, we're going to have to start with 0, but we don't include the last number, which means we're going to go to 11. Let's put a colon here, and then let's print our in-loop variable once again in order to get the numbers from 0 to 10. And then I'm just going to delete this, save the file, Control S, and let's run the Python file. And as you can see here, the numbers 0 through 10 are being printed. So this is the sort of basis for the for loop. Of course, there's a lot more things that you can do with the for loop, but we don't exactly understand at this point in our journey exactly what we can use the for loop for, so we're just not going to talk about that yet. But it's good to understand the fundamental basics of the for loop. So now we're going to learn a little bit about the while loop. And the while loop, like I said, is a little similar to the for loop, but the syntax is going to be a little bit different. So we're just going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to print the numbers 0 through 10 using a while loop. A while loop is interesting because you only have a condition. There's no in-loop variable in a while loop. So we basically have to create our own. So here, let's just create one. We can name it num if we want as well. Because of scoping, this variable right here is only available inside of the for loop, which means we can define a variable of the same name outside. And let's create the while loop. The while loop syntax looks like this. All we have to do is say while, and then let's say our case. So since we want to print the numbers 1 through 10, the number is going to be less than 11. So similar to that range function. You can do num is less than 11, or you can do less than is equal to 10. They basically mean the same thing since num is always going to be an integer in this case. I'm going to do num is less than or equal to 10 because that kind of makes a lot more sense. So inside the while loop, what do we want to do? Well, we actually want to see our number, right? So we're going to print the number. But now, what else are we going to do? Think about it here. While num is less than or equal to 10, well, there's nothing changing num, right? It's just going to stay 0 the entire time, putting us into what's called an infinite death loop. This happens when, in a while loop, you're never going to go towards your terminating case, or when the while loop statement is going to be false. So what does this mean? This means we need to update our variable in order to approach that ending case. So in here, we would have to add 1 to num. In this case, we can do this. This plus equals is equivalent to this. In Python and most other languages, using plus equals is just a shortened way to write that. So now let's try this out. I'm just going to comment these 2 lines out. All right, make sure to save the file. Let's run it. And as you can see here, it does still print the numbers 0 through 10. So those are the basics of the for loop and the while loop in Python. And now we're going to talk a little bit about using in-loop statements to control what happens inside of your loops. Let's take the same example as the for loop. What if we wanted to say we only wanted to print the even numbers from 0 to 10? Well, what does that mean about our odd numbers? That means we just want to skip over the odd numbers but stay in the loop. And this basically means we're going to use the continue statement. Okay, so we understand that. We need to use the continue statement. But what the heck? How the heck are we supposed to know a number is even or odd? Well, this is when I'm going to introduce a very popular operator inside of the programming world. And that's called the modulus operator, represented by the percent. So what does the modulus operator do? The modulus operator turns the remainder of 2 numbers division. So for example, 7 mod 4 is 3, because 7 divided by 4 is 1, but there's a remainder of 3. And you might be thinking, how the heck is this supposed to help us with finding odd or even numbers? Well, what's one of the most fundamental rules of an even number? It's divisible by 2, right? And if it's an odd number, it's not divisible by 2, right? This means that we can use our modulus operator and an if statement to check if a number is even or odd. So let's check if the number is odd. How are we going to do that? Well, if we take the number and we mod it by 2. If this number is odd, what does that mean? Well, let's just take an example. 5 mod 2 is going to be 1, because 5 divided by 2 is, a little over 2, but you're going to have a remainder, and that remainder is going to be 1. So in order to check if a number is odd, we have to check if the number modulus by 2 is 1. And if this case is true, we just want to skip over the case. So what we're going to do is use the continue statement like this. And then here, after this, all we're going to do is print num. And you might be thinking, whoa, isn't num, and you might be thinking, whoa, num, isn't that going to print, all numbers still? There's no else statement. Well, think about it like this. We don't want to print the odd numbers, and the odd numbers are completely encapsulated inside of this if statement, right? That means no matter what, an odd number will be continued on. This means the only numbers left are going to be the even numbers, the numbers we want, which means we can just use a regular print statement. Let's try it out. Remember to save your file before running. Let's run the Python file. And as you can see here, it will only print the even numbers from the range 0 to 10. And in this case, 0 is technically an even number simply because 0 mod anything is going to be 0 because, there's no remainder when you divide by 0. So what if I got super scared of the number 4, but I was, too lazy to change the range of the range function to, just stop at 5? Well, what we're going to do is use the break statement, which would just break the loop entirely. So let's delete this. And what's our case, right? I'm really scared of the number 4. I hate the number 4. So if the number is equal to 4, we're just going to break out of the loop. I'm so scared of the number 4. Let's see what happens when we run this file. Save it, run it, and as you can see here, it does not print the number 4. That's because on the iteration of value 4, when num is equal to 4, it's going to break. It's going to terminate the loop. That means this line of code is never going to be run. But let's just take this, Let's see what happens when we have it up here. Now, when we save the file and we run it, it's going to print the value 4 before breaking out of the loop. That's because the print statement is first, and it's going to print the value before checking if the number is 4. So what if we saw the number 3 and we really don't care about the number 3, You just walk past, you just, act nonchalant. We don't care about it. That's when we would use the pass statement. The pass statement will quite literally do nothing, as I said before. So if we were to write if num is equal to 3, and we're just going to pass, this basically will not change what the code does. And as you see, when we run the Python file, the numbers 0 through 10, they're still all going to be printed. So yeah, to sort of recap, the break statement will break out of the loop entirely. The continue statement will continue onto the next loop without looking at the rest of the code, and the pass statement will quite literally do nothing. So now that we got some practice using for loops and in loop statements, I think it's time for a short quiz. So question 1, what does the following code produce? The correct answer is the numbers 1, 2, 9. The range function goes to but does not include the last number. Question 2, what about this one? The correct answer for this one is all the numbers from 0 to 9. Once again, the range number does not include the last number, and if there's only one number passed into the function, Python will assume that is the last number and set the first number to 0. Question 3, if I wanted to end a loop prematurely, what in-loop statement should I use? The correct answer is break. Just think about it. Ending a loop prematurely means that you want to break out of it, which means that you would use the break statement. Question 4. If I wanted to end an iteration prematurely, what in-loop statement should I use? Ending an iteration prematurely means that we still want to be in the loop, but we want to skip whatever code there is left to run in the iteration. This means that we would have to use the continue statement. So that about wraps it up for today. Let me know if you like the format of today's video by leaving a like, and let me know any questions you have in the comments. Don't forget that we offer private tutoring, and all you have to do is email us at pscholarsacademy@gmail.com or fill out the form in the channel description. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Aiden. Peace.